every situation you're in is a chance for you to decide who you want to be. This is really cool, and it is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Every situation, especially if it's a conflict or an argument or just a disagreement, every one of those is an opportunity for you to decide who you want to be and to show up in that way. A lot of us, I think, in those challenging moments, think about the other person, what they're saying wrong and how rude they're being or selfish or, how they're getting it wrong and you're right. If we can let that go, a whole lot more becomes available to us. And especially with emotional intelligence, this helps you to choose connection in those moments rather than control or winning. We had a moment here last night with one of our kids, and oh my goodness, it drove this lesson home, not just for me, but for them too. I'm going to tell you guys all about it. But first, just think about this for a second. What if every argument or every misunderstanding, maybe even every eye roll from your child or a frustrating comment from your partner wasn't just a conflict to get through or to win, but is actually an opportunity for you to choose who you want to be? Now, this is like a radical shift away from how we usually see arguments and people who upset us, partner and kids. And I actually think there will be 90% of people listening to this will have never heard or considered this perspective. Trust me, it is liberating. Okay, so I mentioned a story last night from my home. Our oldest went to the local grocery store yesterday afternoon and took $10 of his own money and went to just buy some treats and some snacks and things like that, and then come home. Now, this was just before dinner, so I was cooking and he came in and was visibly upset. Something was wrong. And I said, okay, let me just finish this and then let's go talk about it, because he said, Mom, I need to talk to you. He pulled out the stuff that he had bought, but then he told me the story of what had happened when he was paying for the items. He went to one of those registers that was like a cash or card register. So it was a self-serve one, and he had a $10 note of his own money. This is how he explained it to me. He had a $10 note and it had a tiny rip in it, and he didn't think anything of it. So he put it in the machine, and when the machine spat it back out, it had ripped off almost maybe a quarter of the $10 note. He went to ask for help from the lady who was kind of wandering in the self-service area. And he described to me that basically she said, that money's ripped. You can't use it. You'll have to go to the bank and they'll replace it. And he said she was really mean. She didn't help me. She just said I can't use it and I couldn't get my things. And I said, well, that sucks, but how come you have the food in your bag? What happened? And he said a really lovely other lady, a customer, had come over and then saw what was happening and then offered to pay for his items. So there was good and bad to this story. I was like, that's so kind of her. What a random act of kindness. How nice. But we were obviously talking about how the sales assistant had not helped him, not been very kind and empathetic, and kind of just dismissed him. And obviously him being a kid, he didn't think, or maybe didn't have the confidence to ask her to help him with the note or to get the ripped part of the note out of the machine. So anyway, he was flustered, he left, he brought the stuff home, and then we have the conversation. So I then had the opportunity to deal with that situation with him. I had the opportunity to model what I thought and what my perspective was of the situation and the sales assistant and how he was treated. But also then I had the opportunity to decide, what are we going to do now with this ripped $10 note? Do we just leave it, go to the bank? Or do I encourage him to go back to the grocery store and sort it out and prep him and script what he could say? Or do me or my husband, one of us, go with him to then sort it out? So I love that this was such a great example of the stuff that I'm talking about in today's episode, because it happens literally daily. We have moments like this where we think, what am I going to do? How am I going to act? What's my behavior going to be? What do I want it to be? And to do that, we have to know how we feel and then what outcome we want from the situation, and manage our emotions and our language and our communication to get the best out of the situation for everyone. So at the end of the episode, I'm going to tell you how that story ended and what we ended up doing last night. I was actually super proud. So a brilliant author called Neil Donald Walsh says that every relationship is an opportunity to decide who you really are. Not just in the big defining moments, but in the coffee shop moments when someone jumps in front of you, or when a car won't let you merge, or when your mother-in-law says something passive aggressive, or maybe even when your child blames you for not reminding them about their homework. So today in this episode, I'm going to be talking about conflict as like a mirror, meaning that you might need to stop focusing on the other person in the situation and what they're doing wrong, and instead look at yourself, how you're showing up, what you're thinking in the midst of that situation, and how you're communicating too. So I'm going to show you how emotional intelligence really helps you to respond not from old patterns or enter power struggles, but actually to respond from your values, your self-awareness and connection. And 100% of the time, you will leave feeling so much better, even if you don't reach an agreement with that person, or even if your child stomps away from you, cursing you, the outcome will be better overall. So I want to talk about, who are you choosing to be? Again, every situation gives you the chance, the opportunity to choose and express who you really are. Every single conversation you have, especially the ones with conflict, reveals this one hidden truth. It's the gap between who we want to be and what we're currently doing. I think you know the gap I'm talking about. Here are some examples though. You probably believe, if you're like me, you probably believe that you're a nice, kind, understanding, respectful, empathetic, emotionally intelligent person. But when someone cuts you off in traffic, do you get triggered? Do you curse them, or do you explode, or do you breathe and think they're in a rush and then just move on? When your child says something rude to you, do you meet it with empathy and with curiosity, or rather with like control and consequences? So there's something called cognitive dissonance. This is a psychological term, and it's the name for this uneasy feeling that we have when we snap at our kids, even though we promised ourselves that we would be calm and parent with emotional intelligence. Cognitive dissonance, whilst it's uncomfortable, it's actually incredibly useful. It shows us where there's a gap between who we are right now and then who we want to become, or like who we say we are. So with emotional intelligence, we can close that gap. And I think this is hard because most of us, number one, were never taught how to navigate conflict in a healthy way. I certainly wasn't. I did not see my parents argue very much at all. And if I did, it was kind of like very quick, very under the breath, very quiet and low, and swept under the rug. Also though, our nervous system is built to protect and to mobilize when it senses threat. So when our kids argue or they push back or they melt down, we don't know what to do. And worse, we often model the very behaviors that we don't want them to learn. Don't worry, I have been there. So first, let's talk about the connection shift. This is kind of the mindset that I think we really need to get into, and maybe the old one that we need to get out of, so that we can actually shift the way we are seeing people and situations and their behaviors just from the get-go. So shift your mindset from being right in a situation or an interaction or a relationship. Shift it from being right to being curious. I think a lot of you may know the name Jefferson Fisher. If you don't, he's a trial attorney. He is the author of The Next Conversation, which I'm currently listening to on Audible. It is so good. And also he has about 6 million followers on Instagram. So he is awesome. A quote from him is, "Don't talk to win, talk to connect." So ask yourself, what are they really trying to say here underneath their words? You know, the concept of the iceberg, this is coming into play. And also, it is okay to press pause and then come back to the conversation later. That's not avoiding, it's not a sign of weakness, and it's not folding or giving in. It's actually modeling strong emotional intelligence, behavioral self-control, and self-awareness. Okay. Now I have 4 really awesome tools that you can use in the midst of a situation, especially a conflict, when things are kind of going south, or maybe you don't want them to go south and you're like, no, I'm not going to have that whole cognitive dissonance thing. I'm going to act and show up how I want to. Okay, first one is, this is something I am still actively working on. I think I'm going to work on it for my whole life. I always forget that I can press pause when I need to. Like nothing has to be nipped in the bud in that moment, right? I'm trying to use phrases like, okay, I'm feeling really overwhelmed now. I need to take a moment. Or this is going nowhere. That kind of similar to, hey, can we revisit this after dinner, please? I also sometimes do say we're going around in circles, or like we're getting in a loop here. We're not getting anywhere. I think that is really helpful to show the other person. It could be my husband. It could be my kids, just to show them that like, we're not really getting anywhere. It's not productive. Let's come back to this when everyone is a little bit clearer. The second one, you might have heard it a lot. It's using I statements. I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but I promise you it is so, so beneficial. Instead of saying something like, you never help me cook or put the kids to bed, it could be, I'm really struggling with cooking dinner and putting the kids to bed. It is taking a toll on me. I think I really need some help. So it kind of shifts the focus away from them, which is usually shame and blame, to yourself and what you need or how you're feeling. Third one is repair language. So sometimes we say stuff that we shouldn't, or we say stuff that's inaccurate, or we're kind of pulling, like sometimes I grasp at straws when I'm in a disagreement, especially with my husband. And what you can say in those moments is, actually, hang on, what I meant to say was. So you can repair when you know you've like overstepped a line or you've said something that's not true, you can repair that. So instead of saying something like, your father is always so rude to me, you can actually say, okay, sorry, what I should say is that I feel like he's dismissive when I suggest things. Fourth one is check your assumptions. We make so many assumptions as humans. It's what our brain does, but we need to be able to check those and just not jump to conclusions all the time. Most of the time, they never end well. So check your assumptions might look like, I assumed you were ignoring me, but maybe that's not what was happening. Can you tell me what was going on for you? This happens a lot when the TV is on or the kids are engrossed in an activity and I'm trying to call their name because lunch is ready or dinner or something. And I have to check my assumptions because I start to get frustrated when really they're just engaged and their brain is like locked into something. Okay, let's move on to some tips on what to do after a conflict or a disagreement. It doesn't end like when the conversation ends. There's always more that you can do. There's opportunities there. So first one is recognize that reconnection is more important than handling things perfectly. Most of the time, like 99% of the time, I think we don't handle things perfectly. Like what even is perfectly? You might feel like it's perfect if you're like, well, I said everything I was going to say and I think they heard me. Well, actually, maybe they're sitting there stewing, plotting against you because they're so mad that you feel like you're right and they haven't felt heard. Okay, so model apologizing and owning your part and maybe even asking how the other person felt. Yes, this stuff is uncomfortable. I'm not saying it's easy. And then finally, remember that emotional intelligence equals repair after a rupture and empathy over ego. You don't have to do this right. You don't have to always win. That shouldn't be the aim. It should be connection and understanding and then repair when you need to. Okay, there's a lot there. I want to kind of finish up with a few little tips on how can we help our kids to learn this stuff. I always say that if we want to raise emotionally intelligent kids, we have to first become emotionally intelligent parents, and that's not easy. So some of these are kind of focusing on like living it ourselves in order to teach it to our kids. So the first one with kids is you can narrate your process out loud. I've started probably a few years ago taking the time to do this because I'm just more aware of it. And I might say things like, I really wanted to yell, but I'm going to take a breath so that I can be calm instead. So I tell my kids, I like narrate what is happening for me and then how I'm making my choices in the disagreement or the conversation. Also, you can model things like, you know what? I chose to be kind because that's the kind of person I want to be. And this goes with apologies too. You can explain that apologizing feels really yucky or really hard, but you know that it's important. So you're coming to your child to make amends for how you treated them or what you said or did. And the last one is, this is really cool. I wonder if some of you guys might give this a go. Ask your child some reflective questions. So this might be after, when things are cooled, obviously not in the heat of the moment. It could be like, hey, how do you think you handled that? Did that match who you want to be? I would probably start with acknowledging how I handle the situation first so that it doesn't feel like I'm interrogating my child. I think that can be really, really helpful. So let me leave you with this last thought. In every moment, you get to decide, am I going to escalate or evolve? Because remember, every conflict and every conversation is a chance for you to decide who you want to be and how you want to show up. Forget about the other person, forget about your kids or your husband or your wife or that colleague at work. It doesn't matter. They're going to choose and decide on how they show up. You can only control yourself. You have the ability to work on and evolve your emotional intelligence, your self-awareness, your behavioral self-control, your conflict resolution skills, your communication skills. Like, this stuff is hard, but it is so, so worth it. So just remember, next time, even when you're picking up your kids at the school gate or you're dropping into the coffee shop to order something, when you meet and speak to people, every single one of those is an opportunity for you to go, who do I want to be? Who do I want to show up as? How am I going to embody that today? Oh, I almost forgot to wrap up the situation from last night. Okay, so we had a talk about it, me, Alex, my husband, and our child, and we decided that I would go with him to the grocery store, and I took the note and I said, you don't have to do any of the talking. This is what parents are for. These are really tough moments. Let me handle it. And I said, all you need to do is kind of point out the register that you were at so that they can maybe check. They've probably got the little snippet of the note that's like still stuck in there. Anyway, we went up and we got out of the car, walked in, and we went to the service desk, and I explained what had happened and pointed to which register it was at. And I kid you not, the person who served us said, oh, I know what you're talking about. He pulled out this little blue snip at the corner. This is a $10 note, right? It's blue in Australia. And he put it on the table and I put mine up and they fit like perfectly. And he said, oh, we got it out of the machine. Sorry about that. And I said, can you swap it for a good note for him? And he swapped it straight away and apologized. And I said, all good, thank you. And we left. And on the way home, I spoke to my son and I said, I'm really proud that you decided to come up here because you could have just said, no, don't worry about it. But I said, it's okay for you to stand up for yourself and to get what is rightfully yours. And it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to say, this wasn't right. Can you fix it for me? And I said, I was mindful that I wanted to show up kind and respectful and understanding and patient. I didn't want to go in there saying, that lady was really rude to my son and now he's come away with this ripped note that he can't use. So I didn't want to shame and blame, but I said we can still solve our problem and get people's help without going down that path. So I think it was a really good lesson for him. I didn't want to pass on like a fear of confrontation that I've had for so long. And I'm actually really proud of myself because I showed myself, but him as well, that when things go wrong and you run into problems, most of the time there's a way that you can solve it without getting heated or blowing up or acting in a way that you don't want to. So there you go. I hope you took away something from this. I would love to hear your feedback. If you love this stuff, please remember that I coach parents on exactly this stuff, how to do it, because it is hard. And I have courses on my website that you're more than welcome to have a look at as well. If you just go to stephaniepinto.com/courses, then you'll find a variety of different ones on different topics of emotional intelligence. And actually, I haven't mentioned this in a while, but I do have a book. It's called From Chaos to Connection. And if you're watching along on YouTube, then you'll be able to see it right here. From Chaos to Connection. It's around how parenting with emotional intelligence raises kind, confident, resilient kids. And that is out on Amazon if you would love to check it out or grab a copy. Okay, guys, thank you for listening and thank you for being here. As always, be kind to yourself and keep raising those emotionally intelligent kids. It's not easy, but oh my goodness, it can be done and it is so, so worth it. Okay, I'll see you next time.